This DJNTV show is sponsored by DJ Event Planner, Electra Voice, DJ Trivia and DJ Bingo, ProX Direct, NLFX Pro, Promo Only, Odyssey Cases, Perfect Portals, JMOZ Lighting, Instant DJ Requests, and our DJNTV Insiders. This is John Young from DJNTV. Thanks for watching.
Welcome to DJNTV and Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe. Now introducing the one and only Ben Stowe.
Yeah, baby! Yeah.
Good evening and welcome to Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe! Yeah. That's right, it's your favorite night of the week because tonight we're going to talk about lighting. Ooh.
I mean, Tuesday's always our favorite night of the week, though, no matter what we're talking
But that car rolling by at the just a time, that was really kind of impressive. The sound effects.
Yeah, so you have to let me know if that's a problem. I've got my window open here at my home office.
You know, it was actually really good. I mean, it was just like right on cue. It was pretty good timing.
Oh,
we
good.
We planned that.
Good microphone I got here.
Yeah, it picked it up pretty well. So tonight, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is Ben Stowe right next to me, and Ben and I we've done a couple of shows over the last few years, and we usually talk about things
and stuff.
So, and if it's a good night, there's ice cream.
Yeah, I think tonight's not going to be one of those nights.
It's going to be one of those nights.
That's why my window's open in my home office here, because you know, John, you live in the Midwest, actually not far from me, a few hours, that when we wake up, it's cold, and then in the afternoon it's hot, and then in the evening it's cold. But it's a reminder that soon it's just going to be cold.
Yes, there will be just that. But there was perspiration today, Ben.
I actually worked from home today, and I took my laptop out and sat on the deck for a little bit, and it was nice because again, I'm starting to try to cling to these last few days of, well, when you can go outside
before it goes away. So, Ben, I want to dig into tonight's topic here tonight with lighting, because my goal with tonight's show is that for someone who maybe hasn't done much for lighting, which there's a lot of DJs out there that have gotten their speakers and they've gotten their gear and they've been spinning and they're kind of starting, and now they're wanting to build some sort of a light show. And then there's some others who have put something together but maybe aren't satisfied with it. So really what I want to do is make tonight's show all about them being able to do and either start building a light show and do it properly, and so it will be effective for them as they continue, or if they're going to now say, you know what I did the first time was a mistake, now I want to do it and do it right. And that's really what I want to kind of dig into tonight with tonight's show. So if somebody says, Ben, I want to build a light show and I want to do it right, what are some of the things they should know about before they start investing money?
Well, right away, there are a couple places that I think about DJs using lighting, and one is as a part of the DJ show, as an augmentation of the oral things that you're doing, the visual to match with the oral. That's AURAL, not ORAL, just for those who are confused by it. But anyway, so I could just see all the DJs with third grade attitudes like me that are snickering out there.
Well, I've got the closed captions on, so I got to see which one they used when.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not oral. It's
anyway. Okay, it's getting here. Yeah, oh yeah, they gave us the oral like toothbrush one. So
yeah, no, not that one. AURAL. Anyway, so basically that it's the visual augmentation, like I said, of the DJing that they're doing, for whatever event that is. And of course, DJs do a lot of different types of events, and there's a lot of different types of DJs out there. So when I think about probably the kind of the middle of the bell curve and kind of the bread and butter of the DJ industry, they're fairly versatile They will do things like weddings and schools and corporate functions and a variety of events. So I think that's kind of where, I'll spend most of my time focusing, because club DJs are working in a venue where there's often, lighting and things already in place and that sort of thing. And when I think about DJs that are doing those types of events, I think about ancillary income opportunities as well. Places where they can use lighting in a way that is not necessarily a direct augmentation of the DJing that they're doing, but now they're moving really more into event lighting providers. And that's a great profit center. It's sort of, colloquially, that's a hard word to say, referred to as like, uplighting, right? But it's really so much more than that. It can also lead to some of that midweek money, which is kind of a thing that people like. We don't want to just make money on Fridays or Saturdays. So I think there's kind of two directions that we could go with this here, and starting with, if a DJ says, well, I'm just looking for some lights for my DJ show, my first question back always is, well, what do you want it to look like?
Mm-hmm.
I think this is an individually expressive thing, and people, kind of say, well, what other people do, well, okay, we can talk about what other people do, but what do you want to do? What's going to represent you? What's the look that you're looking for your clients? And right now, of course, you and I have been around a long time. That light back there is made out of coffee cans. When I started DJing, that was sort of all the rage was, like the big par lights and big trusses. And, now it'd be probably referred to as somewhat, gaudy,
Sure.
But we were like, the more the better, And I think now people are looking at a very minimalist, simplistic, we're going with column array loudspeakers and things like the STX 180. The well sticks from Chevet are really popular, very low profile, slim, elegant things, lit up totems with moving heads on top. And of course, portability is a big thing too. And that's why we still see things like the gig bar being very popular. Some DJs, don't like it, and some DJs love it, and that's why I say, what do you want to do?
Mm-hmm. So now, is it so much of the functionality, or maybe you mentioned portability? Is this something that is going to be more of a bigger draw for DJs to go a direction, or is it how you mentioned? What do you want to look like? But I mean, can they convey a visual image in their head in a way that makes sense to you to be able to make recommendations to that? Or is it really, that you head in that direction of, well, how much do you want to set up and how long, what do you have to haul the gear? That kind of, where becomes the factor for making decisions for most people?
Well, I think you have to ask those questions, because you're right. It's not the same for everybody. Some people are really big on portability. Some people are really big on budget. Some people really are big on function. And of course, there's the old engineering triangle, right? You can have,
2 out of 3.
2 out of 3, exactly. So for those who don't know what that is, maybe I'll draw it up here in a little bit. But, I think that's just kind of the thing, right? I mean, of course, we want it all, but we can't have it all. That's not how it works. Mm-hmm. So, I try to ask those leading questions to say, well, what do you want to do? And if what you want to do is opposed with, some of the other things you want to do, then we start walking our way through that. So it's kind of a journey. It's generally not a short conversation. And a lot of times I send DJs out with some homework, and I think they don't like it. They say, well, just tell me what I should get. Nope. Yeah. Here's some homework for you, because, I want you to love this when you're done.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to love it after you've gotten it.
And I think part of it is not only if you love it, you're going to utilize it and be creative with it. And I think that's something that sometimes we kind of don't keep in mind, that we can buy something and there could be multiple uses for it, especially if it's something that we are good with and good at using it.
Well, and that leads us really well into the, event lighting, we'll say, that, where you can use these things for different places. And that's kind of the number 2 sin, the number 2 top sins I think you can commit here, other than buying something that doesn't do what you want it to or you don't like it. But I think financially, we'll just say the top 2 financial sins you can commit here is you can spend too much on something that isn't going to get you a return on that investment. It isn't going to do the job that you wanted to, or you just simply can't sell it in a way that ever makes it profitable. And that's a sin, certainly, unless you just love it that much and you don't really care about the profit side of it. But the second sin is you can underbuy something. And I see this a lot. People are afraid to commit to something. They kind of stick their toe in the water. Well, I know I should get this one, but I think I'll just get this one instead. And it doesn't do what they want, and they end up replacing it, or just not ever getting the work, because it just can't do the job. And Again, I started out by making lights out of coffee cans while living in a homeless shelter, so I certainly can appreciate a budget. Believe me, my choices were literally, I mean, literally, buy gear or eat, right? So, I get the budget, but at some point in my career, I've really transitioned to the buy once, cry once philosophy. And now I have a lot of equipment that is really quality, and I'm getting a lot of work because of it. And I actually sort of crammed together some pictures of some recent events of things that I did. And it's creating sort of like I'm really trying not to use the reference snowball effect, because soon it will be snowing. But but that's what it is. Where people are saying, "Wow, that is so much better than what we've seen elsewhere," and we want that, right? So,
but I think your buy once, cry once. There's this teeter kind of this rail we have to ride in this, because as you jump back to your very first point, there's times where we can get excited about something, we can buy something, and maybe we can't sell it enough in our market to justify the investment, even though we loved it, even though it's awesome.
Yep. 100%.
$10,000 worth of lights sitting in my my garage that I never use is probably not a smart investment for me.
No, it isn't. And in those rare situations, maybe rent. I for example, here's a good example. I think chain motors. I had a DJ asking me about chain motors, and I don't think they had any understanding of how expensive this was about to get, because, it's not just the motor, which is largely a la carte, by the way, the motor plus the chain, plus the hook, plus the cabling, plus it's, you don't just buy a motor, now your vendor will configure it in a usable way for you, but all these things get added on. So now you've got motor cable, and then you've got rigging steel, and then you've got, motor control, and, pretty soon for a few motors, you're into 10 grand really fast. Yeah. It doesn't take very long to get to $10,000 in motors at all. And, so I asked this DJ, I said, how often do you anticipate using motors? They said, oh, I don't know, maybe once or twice a year. And I said, no, forget it. Because, you also got to get them inspected every year. I said, just rent them. And rent the guy with them. Hey, I want a point there. Mm-hmm. I need to hang a thing here. Rent the guy and rent the motor, and then you know what? He's going to pack it up and put it in his truck and go home at the end of the night, and you're going to mark that up to the client, make a little profit, and not have to worry about it.
Right.
Or play. Now, if you're using motors every week, you should own them.
Different story.
Yep, totally different story.
Yeah.
And the same goes for lights, right? So, you're going to have to make those decisions about your comfort level and your tolerance for risk. The other thing too is, DJs will say, well, I'd like to pay this off in 1 or 2 gigs. Wow. Wouldn't we all? Mm-hmm. I'd like to pay a piece of gear off in about 100 gigs. I mean, we have different amortization schedules. But I can tell you, which is probably more likely to occur. So, if you set a reasonable expectation, I'm going to pay this off in 10 gigs or 15 gigs or 20 or 50 or 100, and there's a timeline for that that's profitable. Okay. If you can pay it off in one, well, you should definitely buy it. That's slam dunk. But boy, I hope the client never figures that out.
So you're mentioning the idea of renting the person with the gear and such. One of the biggest surprises for me in our industry is when you see some of these larger DJ companies, production companies in a bigger city than Bemidji and Grey Eagle, for example. And when I'm talking to these guys who are doing these dances, the high schools, and they have 10,000, 5,000 kids, whatever they have, these huge numbers. Mm-hmm. Very seldom do they own the gear. Most of the time.
They're touring, they're talent. They're basically, they're like an artist. We've got shows coming up for, not to name drop, they're just the ones that are coming up, but a couple days Disney, and then Brantley Gilbert, and then Dustin Lynch. Well, they're not traveling with the gear, and nobody cares. People are going to see them. They don't care. The gear is something that they can get locally from a provider like us. So that's another option. Now, I think that if you're often playing in your hometown, it makes sense to also own the gear. There's rental companies are making a profit, or they should be, right? And that could be your profit too, as long as you're doing it profitably. Now, this is really not my cup of tea, right? This is Mark Farrell's cup of tea, or somebody else, to talk about worth, right? But there's an old saying: how do you get a cheap sound system rental? Hire a DJ. Yep. Bring your gear and just sit over there. We just need the speakers. Mm-hmm. So, I think if DJs looked at what corporate AV rental rates are on sound systems, they would say, wow, I'm probably giving this away a little cheap,
Unfortunately, yeah, that's definitely part of it. But I think one of the big things though is that if they need to do that, in our example, we do homecomings and the winter dance and prom for some schools, and if I needed the gear to do those, it wouldn't in some cases it wouldn't make sense if I needed a sound system that could handle 1,000 kids for me to go be dumping the money into that.
Well, because again, if it's one time a year, it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, what's your ROI on that? What's your return on that investment? How long will it take you to make that profitable, and versus opportunity cost? Now you've got some financial wizards on the DJNTV channel too, and this is way more in their wheelhouse than mine. But that too, to say, yeah, okay, so I gave up a little bit of profit by not owning the gear, but I also preserved my cash for all year, and I only needed this once a year.
Exactly.
And we help a lot of DJs in the state because we don't DJ. That's not something we do. We do concert production and things like that. So there's several DJs in the state that and even in other states, South Dakota, Iowa, North Dakota, that will call us up and say, hey, I got a big thing and I need some firepower, or I need this or I need that, and we rent it to them. And sometimes we rent the guy too. They say, look, I don't want to know how you've seen our concert touring rig. And they go, I don't want to know how to set that up. I don't have the time to set that up. I want to walk in, plug in my controller, and play Rockstar. And we're like, you got it.
We can do it. Yeah. So anyway, for those of you who are like, oh, I want to go and do big, those are some of the thoughts behind that you need to deal with and kind of look through before making that investment, is to make sure that it will make sense for your business. So let's kind of dig in a little now. We've talked about the financial side of it, but let's look at some of the other aspects that people would be wanting to weigh out.
Well, I think, everything's financial and the end of it, and so for the other thing though is, pairing the functionality with the cost, again, is there that ROI? So I guess maybe, what we're saying now is let's talk about the functionality and, what you can do with it. I've got a few things put together sort of in anticipation for what the questions might be. Some are some pictures of some things that recently we did that are fairly small corporate AV type things, things that DJs certainly could do, things that I thought were relevant and not out of the reach of a DJ doing, but kind of shows an example of how you might use some of these fixtures in such a way at a wedding or a corporate function,
sure,
or whatever. So why don't I just dive into some pictures here?
Yeah, now we can talk our way around and through and back and forth.
Yeah, this is called We Don't Have a Plan, or I Don't Have a Plan, John. Let's see here. I've got my other computer over here.
Yeah, pop that up and then we'll make sure that we're set on the screen. Oh, we look good.
Excuse me. So here you can see, this is really just corporate AV, person at a lectern, some screens on the side, pipe and drape. It's like a cream colored pipe and drape, by the way. And we have a couple things going on here. We've got some wash lighting that is, you can see, turning that cream colored pipe and drape into blue. We've got a gobo fixture, which is projecting the corporate logo. And then we've got a couple of other similar fixtures, identical to the gobo projector actually, but not with gobos in them, that are lighting up the speaker. But you can see that light spill is very contained. We've got shutters in the light that allow us to cut that and light up only the person speaking, preserving the background look and the floral and that sort of thing. Here's kind of a quick look of the room before, and you can see it's really a very different vibe. It's kind of I think it just doesn't have that same elegance as that, right?
Sure.
So that's why we get paid, I guess. This one I put in just because my friend Sean was asking about purple today, and these are standard gray band shells in the back that I lit purple. All the purple you see is light, and then of course the gobo that you see in the center of the image. So I thought that was kind of a fun one. And again, there was no DJ, there was no DJ function. This was, again, just a person speaking, but got paid, right? So,
sure.
And then just for some fun, here's some tables with some uplights underneath. I think most DJs are familiar now with, a battery powered wireless uplight. and as you can see, the school's colors are purple and gold, so that's what we did. Another picture. I don't know why the camera took a fuzzy picture, but another picture you can see with the background and the projector screens, and and then the lights you can see on the truss overhead. Again, that focused light to minimize light spill where we don't want it. So let's see. Oh, this one just happened just last weekend. Again, a real simple thing. There's a truss with some focused light so we can light up the areas we want. But then upstage, we've literally just got some lights on the bottom and lights on the top to get, make that backdrop take some texture and take some color, and create a little bit of elegance. A very simple. I think our strike and our loadout was an hour. So nice. I guess we could say kind of easy day. Anyway, so those are just some effect pictures that I had these are DJ type lights, many of them, sort of a mashup, if you will. It's a DJ word, right? A mashup between some DJ lights and then some theater type lighting, but lights that I could use to project gobos. I can also use to light up, speakers at a lectern. And, we could talk about, are these things good investments? Again, if you're going to do it once a year, nope, it's not a good investment.
Right. But even some of the lights now in the back, were you using some uplights there to make the wall purple, or where were you bringing that light source in from?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was using. In this case, I was using a batten style fixture or a strip, like a strip light, like a color strip, or in this case, there a batten 72 is the model number, but it doesn't really matter what it is. You could use like a Pixam or whatever, and then I had them lined up right across, and that's how I got the color to look so even too. If I was trying to do this with uplights spaced apart, I would have some real striping.
Sure.
And that's okay if that's the look you're going for. It wasn't in this case, so I just had the lights lined up.
And it's really becomes a situation where that's a look you can do, but taking those concepts, you can still use those with your smaller events for your uplighting, say behind a head table, where you'd want to make that, that cream color, backdrop or whatever they have look blue or any color really.
Absolutely. And I think the important thing is that all three of those events were done with the same lights. So that's sort of to show the versatility, to say, well, what do you want to do with them, right? That's the thing, is you're no longer stuck just doing the same thing. They become tools in a toolkit. You could say, well, how do I want to accomplish this creatively? And there are also all kinds of things like, diffusion filters that will help smooth and spread the beam. I wasn't using any for these, by the way, because I just literally had the lights lined up in a row, with no gap between them. But, if you had to say, well, I want a little bit wider pattern out of a light, I could get some, some diffusion gel that will help steer the beam a little bit.
And in all those, you didn't have any really high-end moving head fixtures. You just were using different types of flood lights and the gobo projectors.
Correct. There were no moving lights in any of those pictures. Now, I could have used a moving profile on the stage, but that's just a moving light that replaces a framing spot type fixture, and the cost gets another zero behind it, and so these I have to go up and focus manually, but it's a quick trip down the truss on a scissor lift and you're done. So, yeah, it's pretty simple things that I could use for other things.
Sure. That versatility, I think, is going to be a big factor that a person needs to kind of think about. Now, with the lights that you were using, that would kind of be the crossover DJ lights, and that. Is it something where those could be too big for the average DJ? Obviously, the ones that were up on the bar probably wouldn't be something that a typical DJ would have in their repertoire. But even some of the uplights,
those are like $1,600 a piece, and that may not make sense. A DJ might say, "I'm not spending $15,000 on lights to light up a stage," and that's okay. There are alternatives. There are lower cost models. American DJ has some, Chevet has some, JMAS has some. I think they're a sponsor. And with varying results. Again, we've got to look at that ROI, and this is an individual discussion. But Eve fixtures from Chauvet would certainly do it. Maybe not as well, maybe not, as color consistent or whatever, but it's going to accomplish the same thing. And these fixtures that have shutters are nice, and that's an important thing, to be able to kind of cut that beam to keep the light where I don't want it to go.
Sure. One thing that I've kind of going a little bit off what you've been showing us, because I'm sure there was video shot of the people who are speaking. And
sure.
One thing I have found
I know there was, in fact, yeah.
Yeah, some of my lighting that I've been using, and this past weekend, I was using some of my Chauvet lights there, and she was going to be, the videographer was doing some video, and we had a situation where I had what I thought was a white color, and thought it was good, but we were getting some flickering that she could see on the camera, but we couldn't see it with our eye. Now, things such as that, is that a situation that was I using the wrong lights? Was I using the lights wrong? What caused that?
Well, let's start with what caused it, and I think that'll answer our other two questions for us. So video that we see, just like right now, we appear to be animate moving objects to our viewers on the screen. But in reality, what viewers are seeing is a rapid succession of still images, kind of like a cartoon where you draw a bunch of things and you flip through the pages and it looks like it's moving. That's exactly what you're seeing right now, and that's exactly what video is. It's a rapid succession of still photographs, 30 of them per second or whatever, or 59.94. Interesting study how that number came about. We had to look it up one time, and it was like, wow, okay, it makes sense. Anyway, so that's one thing to understand how that video is being captured. The same thing to understand is how LED lights are dimming. They're basically turning on and off really fast, and we call it pulse width modulation. So our eye perceives that as a dimmer light. So in order to mix colors, we dim certain colors, but in reality, they're not actually dimmer. They're just turning on and off really fast, and our eye sees that as a dimmed value. The camera, not so much, because the camera is taking still photos. So the camera is going to catch times when the lights are off and when the lights are on, and it's going to be perceived as strobing. So there's a couple different ways that you can address this. And many times now you'll look at LEDs and they'll say flicker free.
Right.
Or they'll talk about the PWM rate, the pulse width modulation rate. What's the speed? Because faster isn't necessarily the only solution. It comes down to when the camera is taking pictures and when the lights are dimming. And if there's a synchronicity there, then you're going to get that strobing effect. Here's an old school reference for you. I'm just shooting from the hip on this deal. Sorry if this isn't making sense. But remember turntables back in the day, right? Some people still use them, right? The true DJs? Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Just set the world on fire now. I was
going to say, I've got my vinyl right there.
Yeah. So, on the side of your turntable, you got different sized dots and a light that shines on them. And when the turntable speed is correct, a certain row of dots is in focus, right? And that's the exact same thing that's happening, is that light is strobing. And when that strobe rate matches the spin rate for those dots, then they appear solid. And anyway, it's the same thing that's kind of happening here. It's not just that faster is better. It's the meshing of the speeds. So anyway, point being, there are lights that are called flicker free, and they have different PWM settings. I can change the flicker ratings in my light, for example. So if the videographer had said, hey, I've got strobing issues with these lights, I can go in and I can see, well, how many frames per second are you shooting in? And I can go in and try to change some things in my lights, and we can make that go away. And I can say unequivocally, I don't have that problem, However, it is ironic because in 2009, I think it was 2009 or 8, I hosted a DVD, which was distributed in a few countries, actually 19, I think, on event lighting. And in this event lighting DVD, we had a flickering backdrop. For that reason, LED technology for the lights we used for our backdrop was not sufficient at the time, and low budget production. Anyways, it's kind of funny. It's still a great DVD, and it's still a ton of relevant information. If you happen to have a DVD player, call me up, and I'll send you one if you just cover the postage, because I got a bunch left over. Anyways, you can laugh about the flickering, because I do.
Was that the Learn to Light?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
When it got distributed in Best Buy and Guitar Center and Amazon and a whole bunch of other kinds, we actually had to do some things to change the title, and it was really interesting. It's kind of like signing a record deal, where basically everybody makes money but me. It's just like signing a record deal.
Funny, yeah. There's you can find reference to it online, but you can't actually find the disc. It's out of stock.
Yeah, I've got a few hundred copies, I think, because the publisher has decided to no longer carry it. I think they're no longer carrying DVDs at all, and so the publisher actually just said, "Hey, there's a few thousand of these discs left. Do you want them?" Because there's 2 DVDs, another one that I did, Geek Boot Camp, and so I coughed up the money to get the discs because I just couldn't see them go in the garbage. So
Sure.
but I will send them to anybody that wants one if they cover the postage. Then it can sit on your shelf and not mine.
As you enjoyed the flicker.
Yeah, but I thought it was funny. Here we put out this DVD on event lighting, and again, it was a fantastic DVD. You can see a much younger Mitch Taylor, and my good friend Alan Trisler, and Kevin Nichols, and so many others that were in the DVD. Many years ago now. What is that? 13 years ago. And anyway, there's great content in there. A lot of it's still very relevant, but the flicker is there. And I thought, how ironic.
That's very funny. Very funny. Okay, I think we're good. We're good with that.
Yeah.
So we'll get off the video side of it. So let's kind of, for DJs who are wanting to get started, where should they start as far as when they're going to start to buy things, but they don't have the budget to buy a ton of things at once? Where would you recommend them to start when it comes to investing their money in their lighting?
Well, number one, I would say to start with a call to us. And that might sound self-serving, and it is, but it's also a sincere thought in that we're going to have a dialogue with you. If you go online to a website and just start adding stuff to your cart, you're going to get what you put in your cart, whether it's our site or anybody else's. The difference with having a dialogue with, the people in our company, many of whom do or did events professionally, is that we're going to be able to have that dialogue and say, what do you want to accomplish? And many times we'll change people's minds. And I think to the better. I just got a really nice compliment from a guy today who said, I just wanted you to know you really changed my life, like 13 years ago or whatever it was, 14 years ago. And I'd kind of forgotten the conversation, but it's really gratifying to hear that, the sincere investment and time we made paid dividends for somebody and their family. And, and obviously they're still talking to us 10 years later. So it's a good business move on our part too, In other words, taking care of people and doing right by people is pretty good business, I think. So I guess that's step one. Step two is a lot harder to answer because I think it depends. We could talk about some really utility fixtures and say, well, you can probably use these in a lot of places. But again, I think we have to talk a little bit about their market. What is their budget? Where are they hoping to go? What is something they can build on and grow on? Or are they just wanting to have something that augments, like I said earlier, their DJ show? Yeah, I just want to have some things that kind of flash to the music, and I want to have a party, and I'm not really interested or care about the corporate lighting side or the event lighting side. That would probably change our thoughts. Are you driving in a box truck or a Subaru? What's your tolerance for weight and space?
Yeah. I think, the idea that a person, there's a lot of questions, and as you mentioned earlier, homework is going to be part of it because you have to really dig down and think about that. But even myself, when I've gone through and put together kind of wow, this is what I'd like to have my light show look like, and we've done that, different variations of that over the years, and in a few cases, there's a light that I'm looking for that's going to be right here that doesn't even exist yet. It'll probably exist at some point in time, and there's been versions that have existed over time, but it's like in order to I want this to be the ultimate. Well, since this doesn't exist and some of these other things are really expensive, I've been able to buy like my wash lighting that will start that process and get me to that point eventually.
Well, and I'm glad you said that. Because I think that there's that too, right? We can always wait for what's next, and we'll always be waiting. We'll never make a move, and then we're never doing it. We're never in business, so to speak. So I think you have to jump at some point and take what's available. But I think wash lighting is probably where I would start. I think you're going to get a ton of utility use out of. Now, again, within that, there's a lot of things we can talk about. It's sort of nuanced, but typically I would say some type of LED wash lighting is where I would start because you can use it in so many different ways. It's also really inexpensive. In the grand scheme of things, it's the cheapest thing,
Is there a brightness or a wattage? And I know how much you would love the wattage questions, when it comes to audio or lighting. But is there a minimum that a person should be investing in that will give them the best flexibility? So you're not going to be getting in, buying lights and then having to buy again because you bought some underpowered lighting.
You know what? I'm going to jump over to some stuff I've got here, and I'm going to talk about LEDs for a minute.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say that wattage is not what I'm going to talk about because, yes, it matters, and no, it doesn't matter all at the same time.
Does anybody else want to start popping those like bubble wrap?
I do because I don't like these things.
It looks like bubble wrap to me. I'm guessing that's the little, I don't know, a 5mm, but it looks like bubble wrap if you just kind of glance.
Well, yeah, you're right. When you say these are actually 10mm,
Okay.
but functionally they're the same. They're a DIP style, pin through the circuit board type LED. And they are called 5mm or 10mm because that's the size, that's the diameter of the diode. And so these could be 5, you could be right. In this case, these just happen to be 10. The only reason I know that is because I'm the one who took the picture. So, anyway, these LEDs, each one, they appear to be clear, right? But each one has a color. And, in the RGB color space, red, green, blue, we can color mix by turning these on and off. And, with varying levels of success in terms of how good the color mixing is, what the palette range is. These are ones I would say, if you still have them and they're still making you money, great. But that's not what this show is about. If you were to buy lights today, don't buy these.
Sure.
This is what was flickering in the back of my DVD. Don't do it. So the next type would be SMD, which is a surface mount device. And here we can see I've removed the optics on some of these LEDs, so we can see the little tiny LED in there behind the optics. And each of these has red, green, and blue built within it. So because they're so much closer, they're so much tighter, the color mixing is much better. And they also tend to be brighter. We're just getting into more powerful LEDs at this point. And then the last type of LED I'm just going to quickly talk about is called chip on board, or COB, C-O-B. And here it looks like a yellow dish, but inside that are tons of tiny little LEDs that has a very, very powerful and very, very even field of light. And so this would be kind of the ultimate for, wide wash and brightness type fixtures, but that doesn't mean it's the best for all fixtures. So, just a quick comparison here. There we can see what we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And here you can see the difference in density. And I truly don't remember who I stole this image from, so hopefully they're not watching the show. But if they are, I guess just call me out.
Or you're thanking them.
Yes, I'm thanking you for the use of your image that I found online and
pirated and took and
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just I took it to probably teach it.
But hey, you know what? They could have, if they really didn't want it to be used, they could have licked it.
Right. Maybe they did. I don't know. Anyway, this is me publicly apologizing for hijacking somebody's image. But thanks for letting me use it. Anyway, we're teaching all the good people out there in TV land. Mm-hmm. Anyway, you can see the density. In a 10mm area, how much more you can get with chip on board versus the DIP 10mm, whatever, or the SMD type LEDs.
Sure.
So I think that's, basically what I think the moral of the story here is now you should get an SMD or chip on board type fixture. And the other thing would be color mixing. I think to just get an RGB fixture now is probably a mistake. Because the cost is so minimal. You can get a hex chip, which is RGB AW plus ultraviolet, or RGB AL, which is amber and lime. There are different color mixing schemes out there depending on what you're doing, but I think that just getting RGB is probably a mistake at this point. It's not worth the savings anymore for most things.
Let's talk about the lime. That's been something that's a more recent addition to the the lighting world. We haven't seen that until the last couple of years. What can that achieve for me that I couldn't do with the atypical hex chip?
Well, when we're talking about the RGBAW, the white comes down to sort of a blue LED and a phosphor type coating. And, we could look at the saturation and, we could get really, really deep and nerdy into the wavelengths that are actually being emitted. And then we could talk about things like pigments in paints and costumes and, what's being reflected back and so on and so forth. But I think we'll skip all that. If you want to hear all that, please come to our lighting symposium because we get right into it. But basically some really smart people determined that by using lime instead of, and you'd say, why a lime? We already have a green. Well, it's a deep conversation. And frankly, it's a little bit above my pay grade. But they determined they could have a much more accurate, and true color mixing palette for TV and theater. And having fixtures that have that, I have RGBAL fixtures. I can tell you, I can literally punch in a gel number into my controller. I can say, hey, give me this Roscoe gel number, this gamma or this Lee gel number, or I can go to tunable color temperature values, and it's really accurate. It's really, really good. And it's just a lot less hassle than trying to do that with the RGBAW fixtures.
Interesting. And that's really, just by adding that lime color, it just makes things a lot easier to hit for colors. Yep.
Somehow they figured it out. And again, it's a little above my pay grade. Yeah. So I think, and I think most viewers probably don't really care why it works either, just that it does. Mm-hmm. So in this case, I'm with you. Normally, I'm a how it works kind of guy, but I go, you know what? I read the science and it seems solid and the light works great and I haven't looked further.
Sure. So for most DJ applications, are they bringing out more lights in our world that are using lime, or is it still kind of more
I think
production?
It's really a lot more of a theater and a TV thing. Okay. I think for what we're talking about, it's not as important. It's not. We're not so worried about now in the event lighting space. Maybe we are. Yeah. But in the DJ realm, and that's. We're talking about. How good is RGBAW versus RGBAL? You can do just about anything you want with RGBAW. If you're getting into the level of client that is demanding you have the color mixing capability of RGBAL, you probably also have the budget for it.
True.
Because those fixtures are easily, probably 3 to 4 times the cost of what's available in the DJ realm. And I don't know that ROI is there. That's what I'm saying. I don't know that I would tell you to go buy that light. I don't know that I would. But it depends on the conversation we have, wouldn't it? So
yeah, for sure. And that's why that conversation is so important, I think, in the whole process, is to make sure you're doing what's in your best interest.
Yeah, you could chase something. A conversation I have with people all the time is about line array. Not to be confused with column arrays or whatever, but I think people see line arrays at concerts and they say, well, I should have a line array.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily. And this is coming from a guy who has a line array, and it's not because I don't want other people to have a line array. It's because I also have point source speakers, and I know that there's difference in function, difference in cost, difference in application. So I think it just comes down to not just saying, oh, well, I heard RGBAL is the best, I should go buy that. But what if you could have 4 times as many lights that are RGBAW and you don't need an RGBAL fixture? Then maybe that's the right call.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit, because our time's starting to wind down here. Let's talk a little bit about when we're buying our lights. You mentioned, of course, the buy once, cry once, buy once. However,
cry once.
Yeah, you mentioned it earlier. There's a lot of cheap lights out there in different spots across the internet right now. Some are going to be more risky than others for whether it comes to warranty and not standing behind stuff, maybe things that are not built with the proper. Address that just a little bit on some of the things you've run into when it comes to some of the whether off-brand lights or things that are kind of sketchy out there.
Well, yeah, I'm not here to pick on anybody, and I'm not going to call anybody out by name, manufacturers or whatever. But I think that sometimes things are too good to be true. Sometimes there's great values to be had. And I know people who've had great success with off-brand stuff, and I know people who've had terribles. I know one guy whose house nearly burned down because the light caught on fire. Battery was, compromised, and they were using substandard components. And, and I think that, probably the biggest thing, like you said, is going to be support and or consistency. I saw a post the other day where a guy was saying, hey, I found this hookup for cheap lights, and I just buy 3 times more than I need because I know that, half of them are going to die. And I thought, well, that seems I don't know. I disagree with that. I wouldn't want, to me, the time I would spend troubleshooting and fixing things at an event or transporting lights that, carrying twice as many as I need, to me, that's not worth it. I would rather just have a light I can count on and say 99% of the time this thing's going to work. But I'm not running his business. He is, and that's what he's decided. So maybe that's the right call. Maybe it's not. Again, it's not the call I would make, but I'm not going to say that he's wrong. He said, well, I still came out ahead by buying 3 times as many lights, and, they die fast and I just throw them away. Do the landfills really need more stuff in them? But anyway, I digress, So I think the biggest thing is going to be consistency. How well will they work? And how often will they work, right? And even when they're working, one of the things we see we just got done spending a lot of time talking about color mixing and talking about precision color mixing, like the RGBAL theatrical fixtures. Well, here we could get into 2 lights where the reds don't match, and in fact, if you look at Video Wall, there is a calibration file for every LED in a video panel, because even from LEDs that come from the same match and are color matched at the factory, there are subtle differences. So there are calibration files for every LED in a panel, and it's really noticeable. If you load the wrong calibration file, it'd be a great example, because you'd look at it and go, wow, that looks terrible. So even with really expensive things like video panels with LEDs from the same batch that have already been color matched, there's still a calibration file. So then if you say, okay, well, let's go buy the cheapest thing we can find and line them up on the wall, they may look different.
Sure.
And maybe that's okay. Maybe it's not. It depends on your client. Maybe one light looks really dark royal blue and the next one looks like a teal, and you're okay with that,
Yeah.
And it just might be okay. And maybe they all look the same and it doesn't matter. I can't say. That's what I mean. There's just no way to speak to that, and even within name brand lights, you may find subtle differences, because again, in Chevet's Pro line, they're working on really tight standards and high precision. On their DJ line, they're like, well, there's a wider tolerance here. We can use LEDs that are not quite the same. And the further down the price tag you go, the more there's going to be. Last thing I'll say about this, we had a guy who brought in 4 no-name moving lights that he had bought from China, and all 4 had broken. They died. So he brought them into our shop and said, can you fix these? We do have a repair facility. And we said, well, we'll try. No promises, because, we don't know if we can get the parts, probably can't get a schematic, but we'll try. And anyway, when we opened them up, we found that no 2 out of the 4 had the same stuff inside.
Wow.
They all looked the same on the outside,
Sure.
But inside they just basically used what they could. And no 2 out of 4 had the same exact circuit boards inside. And we told the guy, I'm sorry. And boy, was he mad, but
that's what it is.
Yeah, no service manual, no parts, nobody to talk to. And we're like, sorry, man.
Wow. You hear stories about that, but to actually be able to pop 4 of them apart and say that there's...
Oh, we took pictures.
Crazy.
And I'm sure this guy was unhappy with us, but I think probably in reality he was unhappy with the reality. I think in reality he understood that, it wasn't, we weren't refusing to fix them. We didn't have the means to fix them, and to get into a component level repair on these would have cost more than the light, which wouldn't have made sense. It's one of those things. Well, just throw them in the landfill and buy 4 more, I guess. Yeah. Or don't. Yeah. Buy something that maybe you've got some parts for, right? I can get a parts diagram. I can get a schematic, but yeah, we laughed after he left, not at him, but at the situation. We're like, that's crazy. Can you believe that?
For sure. Just a couple of minutes left, Ben. Let's talk a little bit about transport and protection of your lighting gear. Obviously, when you first buy stuff, it's in a nice box. And for some of us, when we don't have anything yet, that's what we're using. But when we're ready to graduate and protect our lighting, what would you recommend that would be a good option for mobile DJs who might have issues with, we don't all have cube trucks?
Well, I feel like you're just baiting me into saying it depends. So I'll just give you what you want.
Pretty much, yeah. I've been waiting all night again. It's like I've lost my touch. I used to be able to get that in the first 5 minutes of shows, and now it takes me the last 2 minutes of shows.
Well, it's I'm just I've seen this fish hook before, so I'm like,
what fish hook? What?
Yeah, I've been hooked a few times. I'm a little wiser fish now, but now I'm like, fine, I'll give you what you want. It depends. Because it does, right? I mean, pretty much everything I own is in a hard-sided flight case, but I am rolling with cube trucks or 53-foot, semi van trailers, and it's getting pushed in and out of these things, and it's getting banged around by stagehands, and my stuff would get destroyed otherwise. I think if you're transporting your own gear and you say, hey, look, a cloth bag is good for me, then it's good for you. I couldn't say without talking to you what's going to work well. Obviously, with road cases, you can pile things on top of them, you can stack them. So all kinds of things you can do that you can't do on a soft-sided case. But they're pretty tough to get out of a van by yourself. They're kind of miserable and heavy. In certain situations. And there's a lot of DJs who are taking small vehicles, cars and things to gigs. And, it would not make sense at all there. So it depends.
All righty. Sounds good. And we'll wrap it up with that. Ben, thank you very much for your insight tonight on things to really think about before you jump into that lighting world. If you're thinking about maybe upping your game for 2023. It wasn't the answers for some of you I'm sure you were looking for, but I think in the long run, putting a little more thought and a little more diligence into it is going to pay off in the long run.
Yeah, I'll say this. We want you to make money. We want you to be successful. There is no other motivation we have because, as I said about this guy earlier, who's still a customer a decade later, if we can help you build a successful business, we think that's going to make you a great customer. It's a good move for us. Everybody wins in that scenario. We don't want to just make a sale. We want to help you build your company. And the easy thing to do is to sell you what you ask for. The hard thing to do is to sell you what you need.
There you go. That's good words to live by. There should be a t-shirt made of that. It's easy to sell you what you ask for, to sell you what you need.
And we're willing to put forth the effort. Mm-hmm. And listen, I just say this, if you don't want it, if you don't want the effort, if you just say, no, just give me what I want, we'll do that too. You can go to our website and just click add to cart. The website won't judge you or ask any questions, but if you want us to challenge you, if you want us to be a sounding board, if you want us to be a partner that will help you grow your business, we're here for that too.
Excellent. Up next, gang, is the Tuesday Night Music Show with Brian, Jay, and Howie out at DJNTV.com/chill. Click on that, type that into your browser. It'll take you to a Zoom room. The guys record a session, and then after that, it's a hangout and talk shop for a while. Some nights, it's a lot of while, and that goes on every Tuesday night at 10 o'clock Eastern. They'll be starting up here in just a few minutes. Ben, thank you much, and we'll catch you again next week.
Sounds good. Thanks, John.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.